Perfect. Awesome. So we have the one and only Michael Pitek here with us on the InfoProfit Podcast. I'm very excited for this one because I think his extensive knowledge, I think you founded the company in what, 1984, right? Yeah, 1984. That's a lot of experience and knowledge. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into that specifically on unlocking leadership potential. I feel like in today's age, it is more needed for people to step up as leaders or for people to really be able to understand their potential as leaders and how you guys are specifically doing that with individuals and teams. But on this podcast, we love to showcase people's passions, their expertise, and their skill sets, how they got to where they are, and specifically what they're doing right now in the space of coaching and consulting, and how others can basically do the same thing as well. So, with that being said, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. Okay.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, I have to ask, you guys have a tagline that really stood out to me in the team. And that was one of the major reasons why I really wanted you on the podcast. But help me to understand the philosophy and what it means of turning potential into performance. That spoke a lot to me. And I would love to understand like how you guys came about that and what does that really mean for you guys as well.
Okay, thanks. That's an interesting question, and it's a great one because it kind of reflects some of my background. I have a MFA in theater directing, and I enjoyed a career in professional theater as a director and a producer. So when you look at the word performance with that information that I just shared, it's about like on the stage, you perform, right? And so, if you flip it to another perspective, I believe every person has a great deal of potential. And the issue is that potential actualized, realized, or does that potential sit in you unfulfilled? And so, when I say that, performance to me is you hitting it out of the box, you achieving the best you that you can be. To me, that is performance. You stepping into a leadership role that is a magnet to others, that brings them to whatever vision you're trying to achieve, whatever objective, whatever goal, whatever dream you have articulated that's going to move the needle way out of the ballpark. That to me is performance. So if we can unleash the potential that you have and turn you back into a 3-year-old and let you go, that's performance.
That's awesome. And I think you're hitting on something very key, right? I feel like every coach and consultant in whatever industry or niche they're in, we're in the business of transformation, right? And what you're doing is that same thing. And what for us, it's about helping people turn their passions to profit, skills into sales. So for you to be able to turn this potential into performance, every person has this kind of scripted role, right? And if you ever done any part of theater or acting, I've done so in my past. Even though you have this script, having that opportunity to and flexibility to still play and kind of go off script, but still get to the same objective, the same story, and the plot is very critical. And I feel like for what you're saying, working with these leaders, it's like, hey, we're gonna help you to accomplish all you can be, but I want you to also be able to like be comfortable of not being on script and kind of coming off script to hopefully reframe this person you're trying to be in order to actually get the best outcome as well. Now, I know we had a conversation about play, but what's kind of your interpretation of play when it comes to working with these leaders as well?
Play, I I love play. When we were chatting before, I told you that I actually created a program called PLAY, and it is my probably one of my signature programs, and it's meant to allow you, I mentioned before, to return to the age of 3 or 2, when as you're learning those first words, you always say, "Why?
Yeah.
Why?" And the unbridled curiosity, the unbridled attempt to discover, to get yourself in trouble, but to keep asking why, to play, to imagine in beyond technicolor, to imagine that you can be anything. You can be the superhero that goes through the atmosphere and conquers the dragons and all the robots that are coming after you and still be in time for dinner. And it's that element of us which is innate to us, I really believe we have to learn how to be uncreative.
Okay.
Why I say that? Because um, I've had the wonderful good fortune to have 5 children, and those 5 children have enabled me to be grandfather to 6 grandchildren. The oldest is going to be 11, and the youngest is going to be 5. And so, there's a lot of diapers running around in my life, and and they're always so curious. They're always so, why, Papa? Why this? Why that? And if you can look at our world through the eyes of that why, through the eyes of that 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-old, and not through the eyes of your starched underwear. I mean, come on, we have all these obligations. We go to school and you go, color in the lines,
Hmm.
stand in line, don't talk. All the negativity, all the no, 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 all the denying, because we have to have rules and regulations. But who says we have to give up the discover and the wonderment? And so when I work with people in play, I bring in toys. Toys are on all the tables. I bring in sniffable markers, and if you get them under your nose, they're washable, so that's cool. And I I could call sniff breaks. I go, okay, pick up your marker, sniff.
Is it
And they think I'm actually nuts, as maybe some of the listeners right now are thinking.
gotta be a little bit.
That's okay. You know why? If they laugh at me, I've broken the starch. And I've broken the starch, I give them the permission to risk and be 5 or be 3. And it's amazing how they one of the first things they do is they laugh. And so if we think, I'm going to state a little bit of body knowledge, but I'm not too deep into that, so I'll just stay on the surface. But when you laugh, you release endorphins. And
Yes.
like I always tell the group, that's the best, most legal and free drug deal that I can operate. If your endorphins release, they turn your whole anatomy into receptiveness.
And would you say, like, right, because every leader has their own journey, right? Their own growth journey. And you're saying this concept that we have to, in a way, unlearn the creativity, or which I'm kind of interested in as well. But would you say some of the misconceptions or some of the biggest hurdles when you're dealing with these leaders is getting them to that play mode? Because we have to go from, as a child, this creative mindset, as a grown up, to a more analytical, logical, right, hierarchy of needs, Maslow hierarchy of needs, to where it's like, hey, no, we can still go back and forth in between both. What do you see as kind of like the biggest, I guess, mindset shift when you're dealing with these people, and how to truly unlock that potential? Is it getting
Yeah.
them back into that play, or is
Well,
it what is it?
yeah. And first of all, they have to learn how to be uncreative. They have to unpack
Uncreative.
the regiment well, see what we're talking about here. We're
Hmm.
talking about the difference between the left brain and the right brain in the hemispheres in our brain. The left brain is the domain of logic, of structure, of rules, of words, right? And the right brain is the domain of creativity, of intuition, of color, of spontaneity. It is the domain of image, right? So we see pictures, okay? What happens, there's a natural preference in ourselves to tend to one of those hemispheres over the other. And as that selection starts to become more evident in the young person who develops, that also infuses your personality. And so if you are a personality that likes facts and structure and timelines and schedules, that's more on the left brain of regiment, okay, of structure. And so many times as we grow up, we have to, we have to get ahead. We have to get good grades. We have to get into some kind of career. It used to be college, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so there was a whole deal of pressure to perform. And that is to perform in grades and GPAs and, all that stuff that for a lot of us And I know for me, I used to freeze thinking of a test because there was so much pressure on it. I kind of would, shut down. Nonetheless, what we have to do, we have to say, okay, it's okay. Now let's just loosen again the starch. And or if you imagine in the 17th and 18th centuries, that a lot of the women wore corsets, and so you're pulling those strings in, and you're just squishing all of that flesh and matter into a shape that is prescribed, not being free to be yourself. So what I try to do is, first thing, through laughter, through the toys, through music, through sensory stimulation. Okay, I try to allow the person to start to relax and feel safe. No one can risk anything if you are threatened. If I always like to say, if you live in an environment of fear and not fun, you're going to give whatever the boss or structure is asking, you're going to just give that and nothing more. Because you can't risk me to think of something new that's going to be shut down.
Mhm.
So in this concept of play, and it can go from either 3 hours or to 3 days, seriously, I can expand it. And a lot of what I do is use the concepts that are found in improvisational theater.
Yeah.
And I used to be an improv actor in my youth, and I lived in San Francisco and went to grad school out there for a while. And the whole, when you perform in improv, or even if you just do it, not in a performance professional situation, the concept is you need to be open minded and receptive to anything.
Mhm.
The second thing is you do not have the word no in your vocabulary. So the concept is best illustrated by this phrase, and I have actually used it in intercessions, in coaching, the concept of yes and. I come at this by saying, first of all, we have two ears, but we're lousy listeners. We,
Passively, just
I mean, we have one mouth, but you think we would have 10 because the ears go dead and the mouth just goes on a rampage, and we do not listen. We find fault. We object. We don't truly disengage from that attacking mode. We don't listen to truly what you're saying because I'm busy thinking, boy, I wish he would shut up because he's really a dumb, right? So we don't listen. So if the ears aren't functioning, they don't really engage. And so it's critical to understand how do you say yes and. So an example I often give is, let's
I was about
say
to say,
you're in a work situation and your boss says, hey, Jermaine, why don't you come up and we need to come up with some ideas to how to motivate people. Okay, so you actually believe what I'm saying to you. So you come back maybe in a day or even that same day and you say, Michael, what about this? And we could do this and this and this. And I went, no, but I think we should still do this.
hmm,
And so you go, okay, shot down. So
yeah,
then someone hears our conversation, pulls me aside, said, Michael, slaps me up the face and said, you are shutting Jermaine down. You have to change your approach. You have to allow him to receive, and you need to receive. Okay. I said, okay, let me try it again. So I come back and say, I really was off point. So could you rethink some ideas and come back to me? Let's say tomorrow. So you do that. You come back and you go, oh, you're excited. Da, 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 da. And I go, yes, 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 yes. But that's not going to work.
correct. Yeah,
So
let's
what
say
did I
it becomes
do?
overload.
Boom, shot you down a second time. So I said, no. I said, yes, but what I need to do, so you come back and tell me third day. Okay, so I really screwed up, Jermaine. So what do you think we could do to increase the motivation? So you come up with, I don't know, maybe why don't you say, you tell me, let's have the popsicle truck come by at 11:15 in the morning before lunch, and you know how the popsicle song goes, and give everybody free popsicles. I go, free popsicles? So you think, here it comes, slam, shoot me down.
Correct. You're being conditioned at this point.
right. And my tone of voice was a little dubious there. Free
Yeah.
popsicle. Well, yes. And then in addition to the free popsicles, why don't we have popcorn machine out by the truck and a fan underneath the popcorn machine blowing all that butter smell out into the offices? So what did I do? I said yes, and I said, in addition to this, let's have this. And then you go, yes, and let's have pony rides. And I go,
Yeah.
yes, and let's bring in an elephant. Now, it's all wacky, but who's refuting or denying or rejecting anything?
Correct. I think it's interesting because I think some people are hesitant to doing that because it's like going quote unquote out of scope, right? So me and my friend, we're like, I'm more of a designer by trade. That's why I love having this conversation because I went from a creative background to more like the business route and similar background for yourself. And so he's more of an engineer and I'm more of the creative design. So whenever I have conversations, I'm in that mode where it's like yes and then like to then create just the abundance of opportunities and then having a conversation with him as the engineer is like okay now let's start to reduce some just because of the practicality of like potentially making it happen, right? So for example what you're saying is with these leaders it's not the fact of like just immediately shooting them down but being open to what potentially could be the solutions, and then from there, maybe we do start to retract, not immediately shut everything down, but then start to pick out of the yes ands what could actually.
You are right on point because here's the problem. Basically, your friend is coming at it, whatever you do together, from a left brain logical perspective. He's looking at functionality, he's looking at efficiency, he's looking at structure, he's looking at timeline in his mind, right? You're looking at this broad vista from the right, from anything is possible. You keep pushing the boundaries. So there is a disconnect between the two of you, how you look at this moment, right? So you said something critical. Don't shoot down immediately. So what you need to do, you need to understand, number one, we approach this differently. Number two, we need for the success of this project both of our perspectives, both of our approaches. Because the ideator, which you are, coming up with the ideas, and the producer, which he is, you both need to collaborate because once you come up with the idea, he's going to produce it. Now, on that path from a potential to performance, again, this example, you need to be able to say, oh, so let's say we're ideating and it's this. So then you pull back and you go, what gives you concern?
Mhm.
Now, here you flip into the judge, you flip into the evaluator, and you flip into, so this is not going to work because how are you going to do this? So you discuss that. And what you basically should do in collaboration, you should find a way to get through all of the objections, which are going to sandbag it, solve those objective problems, and open the gate for production.
Got you. Okay. You hit on something very key where it's that collaborative effort. It's not a combative. And I think that happens often from creatives and more analytical side of people where it's like, hey, no, you're so left or you're so right versus let's figure out how do we combine the two together. And it's a continuous back and forth effort to then find this harmonious solution in there. Now, would you say that's been like the biggest shift, right? Because you've been doing this for a while. 1984, that's a long time.
My kids
In a
would say,
respective
my
way.
kids would say, that's probably before you were born. My kids would say in the dark ages, Dad.
Right. So I would say from that shift, right, and how the approach and the development of leadership, right, whether it's individual or teams, how have you seen that shift evolve over time to where it is now?
Well, one of the things that I think I've seen, I'm also an executive coach. Okay. So I will work with an individual or a team in trying to get that performance and that potential, right? When I first started doing this, coaching was still perceived as you're broken, you're screwed up. just like psychological therapy used to be. Now it's really gratifying that people will often talk about, yes, and I had this package, and I have an executive coach that has been assigned to me. It's like a perk.
Yeah, it's like a badge of honor now. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, this coach, this coach.
yeah, yeah. So
Perfect.
I've seen that as a major shift because I think what that speaks to is that one individual is not equipped to handle everything. They're just not. It's beyond our bandwidth. So we need, as either in a young child studying music or a young child starting to play a sport, you need a coach. You need a coach who objectively sees you. You create a relationship, and this is critical, of trust. And so, in that relationship of trust, in that vulnerability of being naked, of exposing all of your weaknesses, all your warts, right? You can have a coach who's not out to get you. It is a coach out to see you, not to screw you up or say, "Bah." And so that's been a huge shift. However, there is still the stigma of getting outside your comfort zone. That box around us, because I really believe we want to be the best we can be. We want to win. We want to be successful. But how do we do that success? And at what cost do we pay for that success? Unfortunately, I haven't seen the shift in that.
So that's an
We're
area we still got
still
to work on.
stretching.
That's the area we still got to work on.
Boy, I think big time. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I mean, each leader has their own, I guess, approach or outcome that they want of how they want to be perceived, or maybe how they want to go about structure. Some may lead with fear, some may lead with fun. What have you seen has been the most common gaps, I guess, when working with people in this area and the challenges like for these different companies or individuals that's looking to basically get this assistance as well?
You mean the gaps?
Correct.
Well, I think one of the big gaps is the leader's ego because the strength on the and the size of the ego, I find oftentimes does lip service to what I'm talking about, what we're talking about collaboration, about trust. And many times they think they're above the law, I'll say the word law, or above the rules, above the norm, above what they're asking their people to do to become more collaborative, more trusting, more
Hmm.
open, more vulnerable. So if the ego of the leader really doesn't allow anyone else to sit at the table, what's the value of having a table?
Fair.
So, and it goes back to the no but and the yes and. If I keep asking you for contribution, but I don't really have any intention to listen to whatever the heck you tell me.
Hmm.
You're smart. You're gonna know the game I'm playing,
Hmm.
and you're not gonna give. Or you'll give enough just to get by, but I don't think we give enough to thrive.
Do you think that becomes from like a area of intimidation for the individual and like because I'll speak very openly and honestly, I was one of those people growing up to where a person would ask me like, Jermaine, what don't you do? Right. But in my mind, I never saw it was anything different. I just saw it was myself like being who I am and just open to opportunities and taking them on, and they just ended up working out. So when I say that, there was a point of time where I felt like I had a fear of what my actual potential could be because I kept getting that question. It made me think like, okay, am I doing too much or am I like showboating too much, but I wasn't. It's just a part of my skill sets. So I got like intimidated to actually see what my potential could be or where could it go. And I had to like overcome that mentally. Do you feel like most people, they kind of struggle with that same thing, that threshold of what their potential should be or could be and like going for it for some reason?
Yes, and see, this is. I mean, I'm smiling listening to you because you probably were very. You had an appetite that was not satiated.
Yes.
You had a why that was colossal that couldn't fit in the room because your curiosity. You had passion,
Hmm.
and so you know, and you probably were a stinker and hard to control and doing all this stuff that probably got you in trouble, and that's great. because you were looking for more, right?
Yeah. That's correct.
And the more that you were looking for was probably exceeded the boundaries of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or 15-year-old. And you were probably in the three-quarters of a century old wisdom, but that doesn't fit in the body of a kid, right? Or even when you look at the workplace and people, leaders are always looking for the high potential performers, right?
Hmm.
And they want to give them opportunity. They want to give them additional training so that their opportunity, their potential is truly corporate performance, right? So again, we have the potential, spit, shine it, educate it, let it go to create performance, which in the corporate world does and should come back to the bottom line.
Hmm.
So our company, whatever the company is performing. Now, part of the disconnect there, I think, is we forget that many times the only way we can perform is to enable the interaction of people. Even if I'm a consumer, even if I'm buying, let's say, toothpaste, uh, you need to go back and say what is that chain of human interaction, and how are we treating those consumers, those customers, from the ideation of a product to the production line to the packaging design to the shipping
Hmm.
to the placement in the retail operation to the cash drawer. Cha-ching, that'll be $5.45, sir.
Correct.
What is that chain? And if we have, I don't know, this is where sometimes I feel people may think, wow, he is really naive and he hasn't grown up. Because I think if we did that, wow, what we would be partners in,
Hmm.
collaborators and creators of, right?
Yeah.
The
I think
experience of potential and dreaming, and where dreaming becomes reality. And in the act of dreaming, we push the boundaries and we expand and we create, and we are able, by being vulnerable, by being trusting of one another, to walk through our fear.
I think you're touching on something very interesting, especially with the play aspect. I remember hearing someone talk about, they're like, I want to get older but stay as young as possible. So, or something like that. So where it's like, the goal is not to get just become older. It's like, how do you stay as young as possible for as long as possible? And it's touching back on that to where it's like, yeah, maybe we have to do some analytical, logistical factors because obviously there's certain key important operational things that needs to happen like within the business. But with that being said, how can we still keep that youth open for that creative side to like stand out, right? With
Yeah.
that being said, transitioning over to some more like tactical stuff, what has been some of those methodologies or kind of strategies and frameworks that you've helped developed or implemented into some of the people you've worked with? Like what's a common step in your
Well,
practice?
one of the common steps, uh, 20 or 30 years ago, I used to sell my toys that I had in the meeting.
Okay. A little different.
I mean, I don't look like a 2-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So, I had this one story. I mean, I used to travel with my toys, okay? And
Okay.
then I branded a bag, a pull cord bag, and I would have maybe 2 dozen toys or balls or whatever I was peddling that week, had them, and I would bring them to meetings. Well, there was this one major global international global company I was working with,
Mhm.
and they had their main corporate offices on Fifth Avenue. And I was coming in there to do a meeting with them. And I had used the toys previously. Well, the place we were doing a meeting was at the end of a hallway, and there were three walls of glass, okay, on this corporate meeting room. So everybody was walking around us, and we were in the
Mhm.
meeting. I was aware where we were meeting. I brought my bag of toys, but I initially did not put them on the table, as I always do, because I was conscious of Fifth Avenue, where we were, and the high visibility meeting room we were in. Okay. So we started. And there must have been about 15 or 20 people around the table. It was a big conference room.
Hmm.
And they're looking around and said, Michael, I said, what's wrong? Where are the toys? I said, you want the toys? They went, yeah, we can't
Yeah.
really start meeting without toys.
That's
So
great.
I reached down by my feet. I brought the bag of toys. I dumped them on, and they just spread them all out. Then people are walking around going, what the hell is going on in
Yeah.
here? They're playing. So, that to me, I think, while it seems to be insignificant, it's a major, major detonation of the fences that are put around us.
Hmm.
And so that also is the beginning of creating a culture of fun.
Happy you said that. That's going to be my question to where it's like, how, because that's what it sounds like it's going to have to come down to. Like, how do you get a company or a leader to be able to embody that type of practice? And I guess it kind of comes down to ultimately the culture and cultivating that culture to be open and receptive to having that
Yeah,
initial play before. Because I remember I'm like reflecting back now of like different opportunities and companies I've worked with, and the best ones that the longest time I've worked with companies have been the ones that have incorporated that that framework as well. Whether it's like at the very beginning of the day, just kind of enjoying one another's companies, creating some kind of activities, and then hey, transitioning more over to like the actual work side. And I'm like, yeah, I've had the most enjoyment just because the environment itself allowed for that opportunity versus other ones where it's like, okay, immediately it's
yeah.
get down to business.
There's something interesting. Let me go back to the toys for a minute. I found when I started working and working with so many different people. I never knew how the people assembled in the room where I was, how they learned, whether they were auditory or visual, or, whether they would be immediately engaged. And this is to the introversion extroversion dimension in us, or you would be reserved, sit back, think, and have to really work through the whole model before you actually verbalized anything. All right. So I find also people get antsy, even if you're sitting for 15 minutes. So I found that the toys were a diversion and also an engagement. A diversion for I'm bored. What do I do? There are people who jiggle the knee, right? Or people that play with the pen, or they're doing this or biting, whatever they do.
I'm that guy.
So you obviously need something in your hands to channel your energy into. I bring the toys and I give them, I literally say, you have permission to play with the toys throughout the entire meeting as long as you play nice.
Hmm.
And then they laugh. Okay. And then I say, and if you see, there's a toy over by Jermaine, I don't want you going through toy envy. Just ask if you can play with it. So again, they laugh, right? So again, using the laughter, the endorphin release. They're saying, well, he's crazy, but I'm going to sniff the marker. I'm going to play with the toy. Then what happens? They actually realize that the toy is doing some therapeutic impact on them.
Hmm.
It's relaxing them. They're allowing to fidget, but while they process, they are engaged, but they are relaxed. They can laugh. Their idea is accepted and not rejected. It's yes anding, right? So all
Hmm.
of a sudden they go, hey, I'm a valuable contributor. I'm being respected. He's trusting what I'm saying. So the toys then often become the request of Michael, can you leave us toys? I've actually had executives say, I'd like to buy, 10 bags of toys from you.
Wow. Whole model's changing now. Now you got a whole e-com branch to your business.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to
That's
say. Anyway,
crazy.
all that potential, and I didn't. Anyway, I'll keep on point.
Okay.
uh, so what we would then do, because your question was, how do you start to permeate
Yeah.
a corporation to create the culture of fun? Well, if toys appear on desks, And
Mhm.
if the boss, let's say your director or manager or vice president, has a basket of toys on his or her table, whoa, that's saying something, isn't it? I've actually seen one of my children is the head of a school, and before he had that, he was a principal. So it was basically the authority spot, right? The buck stops with him.
Yeah.
And so he would go and raid my corporate assets and take them to his school and put them on his desk. And when kids would be called in, whether it was for, you know, congratulations or get your act together, Joey,
Correct.
they would play with the toys. Then they would even come in and no, he didn't call him to have any reprimand. They just, can I play with the toys, Mr. So and so?
Mhm.
And so that to me is the beginning. Right. And secondly, if we can, I once was called in to do a major intervention for a Fortune 500 company and of all places in HR. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And this was an HR vice president, and he was being funky, and he was being funky with his team, and there were a lot of complaints, a lot of concerns, a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, how do you do that to the top person of HR? Isn't that kind of
Well, it was interesting because it was leveled down from the top person, because that was interesting, because
yeah,
when
yeah.
I came in, and yeah, it's like, okay,
I
uh,
wanna complain, but I'm gonna complain, and the person that
yeah,
I'm gonna
this is
complain
the
about
guy, and what do I do? Because he can kick me out of here, and I don't have a job anymore as a consultant, right?
yeah.
And that's happened because of what I do. Anyway, with this particular person, I also went to the top person, his supervisor, and said, I need to do this approach. I'm going to be doing interviews with everybody to get an understanding of what is the context of the complaint and what is going on. And I said, you have to be involved too. He said, well, why me? I said, you're in the circle. He reports to you. And so, in that case, you're not saying the whole company has to be scrubbed. If there's a concern in an area, you have to take all the players in that area and understand where they're coming from and what the dynamics are. So long story short, when I was working with this officer, the VP, and his team, more actively than with the top guy, I introduced Yes, and we actually practice Yes and through storytelling. So I start, it's improvisation.
Correct.
It's storytelling, it's listening, it's all the little rascals who don't want to stay on the same page with you, but they leaped ahead, wrote a different
Yeah.
story, don't give a damn what you're saying because they want to do their stuff.
Mhm.
Ego, 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 crappy listening, all that stuff before, no trust. And we just practice telling stories by saying, yes, and so I try to get them to say the word yes. I try to get them to say yes and with as much energy as possible. Also telling them this is how you kind of figure out what the hell am I going to say next? What you say, yes, and you have to do gestures. Because if you go
Correct.
this,
Be
yes, and
encouraging and
you're
opening
saying
for
to
them.
hell with it, right? Because
Correct.
I pulled in,
You're
I closed
judging.
off. My voice has changed its tonation, and then you have to repeat the last three or four words of the person who just was interrupted. So, yes, and the balloon went up into the sky. That was the repeat, let's say, and exploded. And then if I point to you, you go, yes, and it exploded, and popsicles fell out. I mean, see, you can say anything,
Correct.
but you don't judge it. You accept
Mhm.
it and you build upon it. Well, okay, so we practiced that. I went away. I came back maybe a month and a half later, and I checked in with the team and I said, okay, what's going on? Blah, 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 blah. I said, has anything really helped you? Has anything worked? And someone raised their hand and said, yes. I said, well, what was it? They said, the yes Andy. I was pretty shocked. And I said, could you tell me more? And they said, that forced us to actually stop and not continue doing what we did but listen and re-engage with whoever's in.
That's powerful. I'm just continuously like taken back of the incorporation from your creative background into this practice. Like when I was doing my BFA, no, I was doing my MFA. When I was doing my MFA in design, no, yeah, it was a BFA. When I was doing my bachelor's in fine arts, I then went to work with a Fortune 200 company, more like on their strategic solutions, sales, and communications. But I had an illustration like background, like that's what I went to school for. And when I got done with my internship for the summer, I had so many different artists asking me, they're like, how does an artist go to then work with a Fortune 200 hardware software company? Like it wasn't making sense. And I was just like, guys, you got to look outside of the scope of like the title and look more of the skill sets and the things that we learn for our practice and how that can be utilized. And you've done that in your improvisation, right? Like classes and techniques to then incorporate the same methodologies into this like business world, which is just so fascinating to me because I don't think too many artists or creatives believe they have the opportunity to turn these skill sets into some a monetary gain outside of like what's known in our world. So I just got to give you credit and give you your flowers for that because I think that's so impressive to be able to that you've identified even that little small aspect into something that's been powerful to help transition and to transform so many different like people and businesses.
I'd like to share a little story when I started. I started my own business in Buffalo. I came to Buffalo to run a regional equity theater company, the Studio Arena Theater. And after 2 years being there, I left theater and I left a whole career and I started my company, which was going to be an events planning company before event planners were an established business. The time in '84 when I did this in Buffalo, if you had an event, you went to a caterer or you went to a florist, right? And they kind of patched it together for you and did a good job. But I created this company that was going to be A to Z, soup to nuts, right? We'll produce the whole thing because I was a producer. I was
Yeah.
a theater guy. So now I was taking my theater skills and putting them in the street without the theater, right? So I had a fear though. I had a fear because I was afraid that the corporate community would not take an art guy, a theater guy seriously.
Hmm.
So I didn't dare put performance in I just called the company events only.
Correct.
I was afraid that uh, the dismissal of the arts would be so much a prevailing thought that I couldn't have a chance to succeed. So for a long time, I tried to hide the fact that I had all this art stuff behind me.
Hmm.
Then I realized this is what set me apart. Plus, I
Yeah.
have I have an incredible education in psychology, and I have about 8 or 9 different certifications in like Myers-Briggs and Workplace Big Five and emotional intelligence. So I blended basically the psychology, the theater, the creativity, and my penchant for really a high intuition tuned into the body, to the person to look for that blossoming, that growing, that
Hmm.
thriving. So it's a combination of 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, I give you credit, man. I feel like I could have a whole 2 hour conversation. I know we're kind of coming upon the time, but
Yeah.
before the end of that, where could people who are interested in learning more about you, specifically your practice, and potentially get in contact with you, because maybe they need help as a leader or like even in their overall company to help like apply these methodologies. What would be the best place to connect with you and find?
Well, you can call me directly on my phone. Am I allowed to give my number out?
Yeah, it's perfectly
You can
fine if
call
you feel
me.
comfortable.
Sure. Yeah, my number's all over the place. It's 716-480-8313. You can also email me at Michael at the Pitek Group. Now, my last name is always misspelled. So it's spelled P as in Paul, I as in Indian, T as in Tom, E as in Echo, K as in Kite. So it's at Michael, Machael, at the THE, PTechGroup.com. Or you can go to the Pitek Group and check out my website. And then I'm also a visual artist, watercolorist, and you can go and look at the pictures I draw at Pitek Art.
I love it. I just listen as a visual artist because that's my background. I applaud you because watercolor was one of those things I just could not get down correct. I am more of an acrylic, slightly oil, but I love photography, graphic design. But acrylic paints and watercolor was one of those mediums that just didn't. I wasn't bad at it. It kept me on my toes. I would,
Yeah,
I would say that. So the fact that that's your medium of choice, I applaud you on that one.
I even do pet portraits.
Nice. So, guys, listen, from leadership to organizational play to the watercolor, that's incredible. Michael, as we wrap this up, and there's so many other things I would love to talk to you about, so maybe we might do a part two. But I would say for one thing that you would want to, advise or leave advice to or insight for the people listening that maybe are interested of like how do they actually go about applying these practices into their business, or maybe just getting to the point that they want to revamp their own leadership kind of model. What would be that insight or that piece of advice for them, for the people that are just somewhat curious about this?
I would ask you all who are listening to continue to dream in Technicolor. And as you dream in Technicolor, feel that passion surging up in you and where you just want to do this. And if you're afraid, call me. Or if you're afraid, I would just say, flush it, get
Hmm.
over it, because through fear comes greatness. And it's a hell of a journey combating your own dragons and silencing your own judges. And, you really got to want to taste that dream and to build it. And there may be consequences and you may really be set back, but you can get up and you can walk again. And I just think passion and a dream and a positive, I can do this, is probably the three ingredients of success.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, guys. That is Michael Pitek for you. Until next time, continuously turning your passions to profit, skills to sales, and your knowledge into something incredible.
And
Thank you.
potential into performance.
And potential into performance. I love it. Till next time, guys.
Thank you.